Global money, it can literally build a city from scratch, but it can also bring an entire country to its knees. Today, we're going to dig into that double-edged sword, the flow of investment between countries and the incredibly high-stakes game of national debt.
So, which one is it? A gift or a trap? Well, the truth is, it's kind of both. The best way to think about it is like a two-sided coin. On one side, you've got these incredible opportunities for growth, but you flip it over and there's some serious peril, the kind that can destabilize a whole economy.
So let's start on the bright side, with the promise. It all begins with something called private direct investment. Now that might sound complicated, but it's really not. All it means is a company from, say, Germany decides to build a new factory in Brazil. It's a direct shot of cash, new tech, and jobs right into another country's economy.
Okay, but here's the catch. In today's hyper-connected world, that money isn't locked down. A company can send its profits back home, that's called repatriation, or if things get shaky, they can pull their entire investment out, just like that. For the company, that's just smart business. For the country they're in, that's a huge risk.
And that risk, well, it leads to this massive debate for governments everywhere. Do you build fences, use capital controls to manage the money flowing in and out and keep things stable? Or do you go for liberalization and just tear the fences down, letting capital move freely wherever it wants to go?
And you can see the danger right there in that warning. See, if you open those floodgates too wide, what can happen is a sudden, massive rush of money leaving the country. That's called capital outflow. And believe me, it can shake an entire economy to its core.
When that happens, when you get that kind of instability, it can set off a foreign exchange crisis. And that often leads to a really painful result known as currency devaluation. In plain English, the country's money is suddenly worth a whole lot less than it was yesterday. Imagine everything you import suddenly costing way, way more. Ouch.
You want to see a real-world example of trying to prevent this? A lot of analysts point to China. The argument goes that because China keeps such a tight grip on its currency, you can't just freely trade it. It has managed to dodge those huge, sudden capital outflows that have absolutely slammed some of its neighbors over the years.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit. We've been talking about private companies investing, but what happens when it's not a company that needs cash, but an entire nation? This is where we flip the coin and move from the world of investment to the world of borrowing.
And a huge player in this space is the World Bank. Its whole mission is to lend money for those big, foundational projects a country needs to really get on its feet. The idea is pretty simple, right? If you help build the roads, the schools, the clean water systems, you're literally creating the bedrock for that country's future growth. But here's the twist. What happens when that lifeline, the very thing that was supposed to help a country grow, becomes the very thing that crushes it? Well, it happens when a country borrows so much that the debt hits a tipping point and becomes unsustainable. And that word is key. It means you literally can't pay it back without completely gutting your own economy, the very thing the loans were supposed to build up in the first place.
And right there, that's the moment it stops being just debt and becomes a debt burden. It's not a number in a ledger anymore. Think of it like a giant anchor, forcing a government to make impossible choices, like do we pay back our foreign lenders or do we fund our own hospitals?
So, okay, if a country is drowning in this kind of debt, what's the escape plan? Is there a rescue mission? Well, yes, there are systems in place designed to try and find a way out.
And this is where another huge global institution usually steps onto the scene, the International Monetary Fund. You've probably heard of it as the IMF. Now, one of its most important, and let's be honest, controversial jobs is to manage these international debt crises.
So the IMF has a whole toolkit for this. They run these special programs for what they call heavily indebted poor countries. And the goal is straightforward, to actually reduce the total amount of money these nations owe. It's all tied into bigger picture stuff too, like the Millennium Development Goals, which are all about fighting global poverty.
When you boil it all down, there are really two main paths to relief. First, you've got debt rescheduling. Think of it like calling your credit card company and saying, hey, can I get an extension? You're just pushing the deadline back. But then there's debt relief. And this one's the big one. This is basically debt forgiveness. The lender just says, you know what? You don't have to pay it back. The debt is wiped clean.
You can see how this whole dynamic, lending, borrowing, maybe forgiving, it's not just about money, right? It raises these really deep ethical questions. And that has given rise to this idea, this whole movement, called debt justice. It's built on a pretty simple but powerful idea, that fairness has to be at the heart of all this.
So, after all the economics, after all the jargon, we're left with a very human question.
In this global dance between lenders and borrowers, what does true fairness actually look like? When a rich nation forgives the debt of a poor one, is that a generous gift, or is it simply justice? That's the real challenge I want to leave you with.